Imagine this. You're at a party. The air hums with laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of curated chaos that feels like life itself is performing. You lean against a wall, nursing a drink gone warm, watching a man across the room. He's magnetic, effortlessly. Funny, his gestures expansive, his voice a confident ripple cutting through the noise. People orbit him like planets drawn into a sun. You recognize that version of him. You've seen it before, in boardrooms, on first dates, in the rehearsed. Vulnerability of influencers. It's a role, polished and precise. But here's what freezes your blood. He believes it. He thinks this persona is his authentic self. And so do you. Because isn't that what we've been told? Just be yourself. A mantra etched into every self-help book, every graduation speech, every late-night confession between friends. But what happens when yourself splinters? When the version you perform, the one that earns love, money, respect, becomes so entangled with your bones that you can't remember where the act ends and the soul begins? Here's the first lie no one admits. Authenticity is not a choice. It's a battleground. Every second, you're bombarded by invisible scripts, algorithms dictating your desires, trauma wiring your instincts, culture carving your cravings into shapes it recognizes. You walk into a room and your nervous system calculates, what mask will keep me safe here? The charming jester, the stoic listener, the rebel, the empath, the saint? You switch between these selves like coats, each tailored to fit the climate of the moment, and yet afterward, alone in the dark, you feel a hollowness. A voice hissing, who would you be if no one was watching? But the question is a trap, because even when no one is watching, you are. You've internalized the gaze. Your thoughts loop like surveillance footage, analyzing every impulse. Is this really me? The harder you claw toward some pure, unfiltered self, the more it dissolves, like trying to stare directly at your peripheral vision. Consider the paradox. To be yourself, you must first know yourself. But how? Your memories are edited highlights. Your desires are often borrowed. Your personality? A patchwork of coping mechanisms forged in childhood wars you barely remember. Even your rebellions are reactions, defiance shaped by what you're defying. Nietzsche saw it. Become who you are isn't an affirmation, it's a warning. A reminder that you're already a puppet of forces you've never questioned. So here's the great unspoken question. What if just be yourself isn't liberation, but a cage? A cage made of every compliment that molded you, every rejection that sanded down your edges, every Instagram story that made you envy a life you don't even want. A cage so familiar, you've mistaken its bars for the architecture of your soul. Feel it. The weight of all those unwritten rules, the exhaustion of performing even for yourself, the terror of realizing you might be nothing but a collage of reflexes, habits, and half-remembered advice from people as lost as you. And now, the knife twist. What if the thing you call me is not a core to be uncovered, but a shadow puppet, cast by forces you're afraid to name? Breathe. This is not nihilism. This is the crack where the light gets in. Because if the self is not a buried treasure but a shifting mirage, then maybe freedom isn't about digging, it's about dissolving. But wait, before you can revolt, you must see the prison. You were born into a world that had already written your first line. Before you could speak, you were handed a script. This is love, this is success, this is the face you must wear to survive. The tragedy is not that these forces exist, but that they seep into your marrow, masquerading as your own voice. To understand why just be yourself collapses under its own weight, you must trace the roots of this deception into the shadowlands of psychology, the trenches of philosophy, and the silent wars waged by culture itself. Begin with Carl Jung, who warned of the shadow, the parts of yourself you exile to the basement of your psyche. Society rewards certain traits, kindness, ambition, charm, and banishes others, rage, vulnerability, unproductive dreams. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It metastasizes. It puppeteers your choices through subconscious compulsions. You chase a career, a partner, a lifestyle, believing it's you, when in truth, you're running from the disowned self, the one society taught you to hate. The result? A life of elegant dissonance. You call it authenticity, but it's a ceasefire with your own fragment. Now, Descend deeper. Friedrich Nietzsche dissected the herd mentality, the way humans swap sovereignty for safety. Morality, he wrote, is the herd instinct in the individual. Your values, your fears, even your rebellions are often borrowed from the crowd. Consider how self-expression today is reduced to curated aesthetics. The tattoos, the music, the politics, all prepackaged into tribal identities. You think you're choosing, but you're aligning. Nietzsche's solution: become a sovereign. But sovereignty requires war, not against others, but against the colonizer inside your mind. Enter Jean-Paul Sartre, who named this surrender bad faith, the act of pretending you have no choice in who you become, the waiter who is his job, the parent who is their sacrifice, the rebel who is their rage, all playing roles to avoid the terrifying freedom of self-creation. Man is condemned to be free, Sartre wrote. Condemned, because freedom isn't empowerment, it's vertigo. It's easier to kneel and call the chains choice than to stand naked before the abyss of possibility. But why does this surrender feel so natural? Blame the neurology of belonging. Your brain is wired to equate social exclusion with death. From childhood, you learn to map the terrain of approval. Laughter rewarded a joke. Silence punished a truth. Your identity became a survival algorithm, optimizing for acceptance. Even now, your neurons fire like slot machines when you post a viral tweet or receive a praise, dopamine stitching your worth to external validation. You don a mask, and the world applauds. Soon the mask grows into your face. Here's where Arthur Schopenhauer's will to live mutates into a will to conform. Your desires, he argued, are not yours. They're ripples of a blind, universal force. Capitalism weaponizes this. It inflames insecurities to sell you solutions, turning your hunger for authenticity into a consumer identity. Live your truth, whispers the ad as you buy another brand's manifesto. Social media, the ultimate hall of mirrors, reflects back 1,000 versions of you, each tailored to the gaze of a different audience. You fragment further, mistaking the kaleidoscope for the self, and yet the most insidious force is time. Viktor Frankl observed that humans are meaning-making machines, weaving narratives to justify their suffering. But culture hijacks this impulse. It sells you prefabricated myths. Happiness is a milestone. Purpose is a career. Love is a conquest. You cram your life into these stories, editing out the plot twists that don't fit. When existential dread creeps in, you numb it with productivity porn, spiritual bypassing, or fetishized self-care, all while whispering, "This is who I am." Aldous Huxley saw this coming. In Brave New World, he warned of a dystopia pacified by pleasure and distraction. You're living it. The modern world doesn't suppress your authenticity with brute force. It drowns it in a sea of options, endless choices, endless identities, all just variations of the same script. You curate a playlist, a persona, a lifestyle, believing you're expressing yourself. But the self you express is a mosaic of trends, traumas, and terms of service. The invisible coup is complete. You've outsourced your essence. Your thoughts are haunted by ghosts, a parent's disapproval, a religion's guilt, a culture's obsession with legacy. Even your dreams are not your. When you say, "I want," who speaks? The child craving safety, the ego craving status, the shadow craving revenge. This is the hidden problem. Authenticity is impossible in a world that defines you before it can define yourself. You are not a self, you are a battlefield, a crossfire of biology, history, and the humming, invisible machinery of power. To be yourself is to arm one faction in a civil war and call it peace. But there's a secret in this horror. If the self is a construct, it can be deconstructed. If it's a performance, the script can be burned. The question is not, who am I, but which masters will I choose to serve? The answer begins with a refusal to stop digging for a core and start dissolving the lies. You wake up, check your phone, scroll through a feed of faces, some smiling, some pensive, all performative. You choose an outfit, not for comfort, but for the silent dialogue it conducts with the world. This is my edge. This is my tribe. This is my armor. At work, you laugh at a joke that isn't funny, nod at an opinion that isn't yours. By noon, your tongue tastes like a foreign object. By night, you're too numb to name the hollowing in your chest. You tell yourself, this is just life. But it's not life, it's anesthesia. The consequences of this charade are not dramatic. They're glacial, a slow erosion of the soul. You become a ghost in your own body, rehearsing lines for a play with no audience. Relationships turn transactional. You love what others reflect back at you, not the murky depths beneath. Creativity withers. How can you invent when you're parroting a script? Even your suffering becomes generic, a copy of a copy. Burnout, anxiety, a loneliness so ambient you mistake it for air. Dive into the neuroscience and the horror sharpen. Your brain, a neuroplastic chameleon, rewires itself to cement the masks. Each time you force a laugh at a boss's joke or swallow a truth to keep peace, you strengthen neural pathways that equate survival with suppression. The amygdala learns to fear authenticity as a threat. What if they reject the real you? And the prefrontal cortex, that overgrown bureaucrat, files your desires under impractical and naive. Over years, the act becomes biology. You don't feel inauthentic, you become inauthenticity, cell by cell. Now, witness the cognitive traps. The spotlight effect, your brain's cruel illusion that everyone notices your every flaw, keeps you editing yourself into a crowd-pleasing cutout. Confirmation. Bias curates your reality to match the identity you've sold. You seek evidence that you're the responsible one, the free spirit, while ignoring the parts that defy the narrative. And the cruelest trick? The illusion of transparency, the belief that others can see your true self even as you bury it. So you scream silently, resentful when no one hears you. But the true machinery of delusion is cultural. Capitalism thrives on fractured selves. It monetizes your hunger for wholeness, selling meditation apps to fix the stress of jobs that hollow you, fashion to signal a self you don't recognize, therapies to soothe the cognitive dissonance of living a lie. Social media, that digital panopticon, turns identity into a live service game. Daily quests for likes, character skins of politics or spirituality, endless updates to stay relevant. You don't have a persona, you are the DLC. Even rebellion gets commodified. The punk's sneer, the activist's rage, the mystic's detachment, all reduced to aesthetics, stripped of their fire. You adopt the symbols of resistance, a slogan, a tattoo, a playlist, but remain obedient to the core script. Consume, perform, optimize. The system doesn't care if you're wearing a suit or a septum ring. It only demands that you participate. And so, the counterculture becomes culture, dissent becomes decor, and you mistake the appearance of authenticity for the real thing. On a societal scale, the rot metastasizes, art becomes content, love becomes a metrics game, politics becomes brand loyalty. Language itself turns to vapor, words like truth and freedom sloshed into buzzwords emptied of meaning. Trust evaporates. When everyone's performing, paranoia becomes the default. You scroll past a friend's vulnerable post and think, what's their angle? You hear I love you and wonder, is this a quote from a show they've watched? The collective facade grows so thick that reality dissolves. No one dares admit the emperor has no clothes because they're naked too. But the most sinister consequence is existential. By outsourcing your selfhood, you surrender your why. Viktor Frankl argued that meaning comes from responding to life's challenges with purpose. But how can you respond when you're reciting lines? You float through milestones like a sleepwalker, career, marriage, parenthood, each experience, muffled by the glass wall of your persona. Even your crises feel borrowed. Midlife meltdowns scripted by movies, quarter-life angst filtered through memes. When death whispers, what did you do with your one wild life? You'll sift through a ledger of achievements and wonder whose they are. Here's the unbearable truth. The more yourself you try to be, the more you multiply. The overthinker analyzing every impulse. The people pleaser smothering their needs. The inner child screaming for attention. The critic hissing, not good enough. You're not a self. You're a committee of strangers, each vying for control. And the world? It's a hall of mirrors reflecting back distortions you mistake for destiny, yet in this labyrinth, a faint pulse remains, a part of you that remembers before. The masks, before the metrics, before the world told you who to be. It flickers in moments the act slips, when you're startled by a sunset, when a stranger's laugh disarms you, when grief cracks the porcelain and something raw bleeds through. These are not accidents, they're clues. The maze is not the world, it's the layer cake of lies you've mistaken for identity. And the exit, it begins where all illusions end, with a question so terrifying it liquefies the ground beneath you. What if none of this is real? You stand at the edge of the labyrinth, its walls trembling. The question hangs like a blade. What if none of this is real? Here's the secret no guru will tell you. The way out isn't through answers, it's through annihilation. To break free, you must stop seeking a true self and start becoming a saboteur of your own illusions. Begin with Sartre's grenade of a truth. Existence precedes essence. You are not a statue waiting to be uncovered. You are wet clay. Every moment you choose, through action or inaction, what you harden into. The rebellion starts when you trade "who am I" for "who will I become?" and realize the answer is written in verbs, not nouns. A musician isn't someone who is musical, they're someone who plays. Love isn't something you have, it's something you do. Stop trying to be and start trying to act. The masks will crumble from the weight of your motion. History's great emancipators knew this. Frida Kahlo didn't find herself. She rebuilt herself from the debris of a bus crash and a broken body, painting her pain into a language that scalded the world. David Bowie didn't express his true self. He invented personas like weapons, ziggying through identities to prove the self is a frontier, not a prison. Even Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote privately of untying the knots of his ego each morning to rule from emptiness. These weren't authentic beings, they were authentic becomings. But how? Start by weaponizing doubt. Every time you hear I am shy, I am broken, I am a failure, detonate it. These aren't truths, they're fossilized stories. Neuroscience confirms the brain's default mode network, that narrator of your identity, is just a circuit. Circuits can be hacked. When a thought arises, "This isn't me," ask, "What would me do next if this were me?" Then do it. Reverse engineer the self through action. Next, court the chaos you've been numbing. Carl Jung called it active imagination, dialogue with the fragments you've exiled. Let the inner critic rant. Let the people-pleaser weep. Let the shadow snarl. These aren't enemies, they're informants. A recovering Catholic might write sermons for the atheist they pretend to be. A CEO might spend a day following every irrational whim. By letting the suppressed part speak, you drain their power to puppet you. But the true rebellion is in the mundane. When someone asks, "How are you?" lie. Not to deceive, but to disrupt the script. Terrified, euphoric, a little bored by this conversation. Watch how the world bends. Wear clothes that clash with your vibe. Dance badly in grocery aisles. Flirt with strangers you'll never see again. These are not acts of expression, but of arson, burning down the stage to see what grows in the ashes. Here's the counterintuitive spine of it. Authenticity isn't honesty, it's improvisation. Jazz musicians know true freedom lies in constraints. Set ruthless boundaries, no more people-pleasing. Within radical openness, no plan. Say no to every demand that doesn't make your hands tremble with purpose. Say yes to every impulse that hums with aliveness, even especially if it's out of character. The goal isn't coherence, it's aliveness. Capitalism will try to co-opt this. It will sell you courses on mindfulness and self-actualization. Ignore them. Study instead the via negativa, the ancient art of knowing by unsaying, of creating by destroying, like sculptor Anne Truitt, who chiseled away at wood until what was hidden inside revealed itself, or Zen monks raking gravel to erase their minds. Your job isn't to add layers to the self, but to strip them daily until only the impulse remains. But be warned, this path is merciless. You'll lose friends who loved your mask. You'll panic when old labels dissolve. You'll face what the Sufis call fana, the annihilation of the ego. In that void, you'll meet the ultimate paradox. The you that's left isn't a self, but a process, a flickering signal between stardust and synapses, a verb masquerading as a noun. This is where Viktor Frankl's logotherapy ignites. Meaning isn't found, it's forged. When a client insisted he had no purpose, Frankl made him swear to live as if he'd already died. The man stumbled into creating a charity. His self emerged from the act itself. So here's the gauntlet. Live as your own experiment. Keep a journal in someone else's voice. Adopt a mantra that terrifies you. I am allowed to change. Spend a week obeying only whims that scare you. The goal isn't to discover yourself. It's to unmake yourself daily until every habit, belief, and fear is a conscious choice. The rebellion isn't pretty. You'll be accused of betrayal. You'll wake some nights gasping, "Who am I now?" Good. That gasp is the sound of birth. You are standing at the edge of a burning forest. Flames chew through the trees you once called self. Your stories, your masks, your brittle certainties. The heat peels back your skin, and for a heartbeat, you feel nothing but the raw pulse of existence. No name, no role, no past, just the electric thrum of being here. This is not destruction. This is the universe stripping you bare to whisper its secret. You were never meant to be yourself. You were meant to become. The lie dies. Here, authenticity isn't a state to achieve. It's a fire to wield, a relentless, scorching act of invention. You've spent lifetimes digging for a core when all along you were the lightning, shape-shifting, untamable, tearing open the sky to reveal a truth that can't be held. Rumi knew, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean, in a drop. But we've fetishized the drop, its edges, its boundaries, its illusion of separateness. The revolution begins when you stop trying to protect the drop and start surrendering to the ocean. Your self isn't a castle to defend. It's a current, a verb masquerading as a noun, a flicker between no longer and not yet. Here's the paradigm shift that changes everything. You are not a being. You are a happening. When Nietzsche declared, "Become who you are," he wasn't urging you to uncover some buried essence. He was commanding you to hurl yourself into the storm of becoming, to realize that the you of yesterday is already a corpse, and the you of tomorrow is a stranger you must court with reckless courage. This is why the greatest artists, mystics, and rebels seem to dissolve and reform like quantum particles. Frida Kahlo's shattered body remade into art, Bowie's endless mutation, the Buddha's renunciation of his own name. They weren't expressing themselves. They were unselving. Science confirms this. Every 7 years, your cells replace themselves entirely. The hands you have today are not the hands that held your mother's fingers. The brain that reads these words is a palimpsest, rewriting its own code with every thought. You are a ship sailing through a hurricane, replacing each plank mid-voyage until nothing original remains. Yet still, impossibly, you sail on. This is the ultimate truth that frees you. There is nothing to find, only something to choose. Every moment, you are handed the cosmic brush, the canvas of void, the palette, every color that ever existed, and some the world hasn't seen. The critics, ghosts, the rules, written in ash. So paint, but paint like a heretic. When the world demands a static self, a resume, a label, a neatly packaged story, give them a riddle, a contradiction, a question that unravels their certainty. Marry the parts of you that don't fit, the monk and the hedonist, the genius and the fool, the warrior and the child. Let them clash. Let them birth new colors. Remember Viktor Frankl in the death camps, realizing that even in hell, the last freedom remains to choose your response, not your feelings, not your past, but your next act. That's the fulcrum of your power, not who you are, but what you do with the raw material of now. Here's how it cracks open. A woman wakes at 3 a.m., her chest buzzing with a truth she can't name. She doesn't journal or meditate. She drives to the ocean, strips naked, and walks into the waves. The salt scrubs her skin raw. She doesn't know if she's brave or mad. Good. A CEO quits to bake bread. A soldier becomes a poet. A preacher renounces God to worship the silence. These aren't midlife crises. They're mutinies against the tyranny of the past self. You think you're afraid of change? No, you're afraid of the infinite, the unbearable truth that you could spend eternity becoming and never reach an end. But here's the alchemy. When you release the need to arrive, the journey becomes the destination. The labyrinth becomes the dance. So let the old identities burn. Stop seeking purpose. Purpose is a cage, a story told in hindsight. Instead, fall in love with direction. Move toward what makes you feel alive, even if it terrifies you, even if it has no name. When death comes, and it will, it won't ask for your LinkedIn profile. It'll ask, did you taste it? The raw, the real, the unedited scream of your brief blazing flicker in the dark? Your answer begins now, not with a revelation, but with a ritual. Tomorrow at dawn, do this. Stand before a mirror, not to fix your hair or adjust your mask. Look into the eyes of the stranger staring back. Then speak these words aloud. I am not who I was. I am not who I will be. I am the knife. I am the wound. I am the healing. Then walk outside. Let the wind rewrite you. The world will try to freeze you, to capture your light in jars, labeled identity, legacy, truth. Smash the jars. You are not a noun. You are the explosion.